A millionaire CEO watched a baker give away his very last pastry. The next moment left him speechless. On a freezing December morning, Marcus Wellington, a billionaire CEO rushing to close the biggest deal of his career, stopped at a small bakery he'd never noticed before. Inside, he witnessed something that shattered everything he believed about success. A struggling baker, down to his very last pastry, made a choice that seemed foolish, even reckless. But what happened in the next 60 seconds would change both their lives forever and reveal a truth about wealth that no business school ever taught. This is not just a story about money. It's about what we're willing to give when we have nothing left to lose. Sarah Mitchell's hands trembled as she counted the bills in the cash register for the third time. $43.17. That was all that stood between her 7-year-old son, Tommy, and another night wondering if they have to move again. The bakery Mitchell's morning light had been her dream once. When her husband, David, was still alive, they planned it together, sketched layouts on napkins, argued playfully about whether to call it Sweet Beginnings or something more personal. David had wanted to name it after her. Sarah's Place, he'd suggested, but she'd insisted on something that reflected both of them. In the end, they'd chosen Mitchell's Morning Light because David always said her smile was the first light of his day. That was 4 years ago, before the accident. Before the medical bills, before she learned that life insurance policies have fine print and that dreams can dissolve faster than sugar in hot coffee. Now, standing in the pre-dawn darkness of her small bakery in the older part of town, Sarah faced a choice she'd been avoiding for weeks. The rent was due in 3 days. Mr. Patterson, her landlord, had been patient, more patient than she deserved, but patience has limits. This morning's sales would determine everything. "Mama, is it time to wake up yet?" Sarah turned to see Tommy emerge from the small storage room in the back, where she'd made a makeshift bedroom with blankets and a camping mattress. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and he clutched the worn teddy bear David had given him on his 3rd birthday. "Not yet, sweetheart," Sarah said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Just a little longer. Mama's getting everything ready." Tommy rubbed his eyes and shuffled over to her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. He was too thin, she thought. They both were. When you choose between paying bills and buying groceries, something always suffers. "I had that dream again," Tommy said quietly, "about Dad." Sarah's heart clenched. She knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level, and brushed the hair from his forehead. "Was it a good dream or a sad dream?" "Both," Tommy said. "He was teaching me how to make the cinnamon rolls, like he used to. But then I woke up, and he wasn't here." "I know, baby. I know." Sarah pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his hair, fighting back the tears that seemed always ready to fall. "But you know what? Dad is always with us. Every time we make those cinnamon rolls, every time we help someone, every time we're kind, even when it's hard, that's Dad living on through us." Tommy nodded against her shoulder. At 7, he was wise beyond his years, forced to grow up faster than any child should have to. "Go back and rest a little more," Sarah said gently. "I'll wake you when it's time for school." As Tommy disappeared back into the storage room, Sarah stood and looked around her bakery. The equipment was outdated, held together with hope and duct tape. The paint on the walls was peeling in places. The display cases that once gleamed now bore the scratches and scuffs of hard use. But it was hers. It was all she had left of the life she and David had built together. She turned on the ovens and began preparing the day's small batch. Flour, sugar, butter, eggs, the simple ingredients that had fed her family and her dreams. She worked methodically, her hands moving through the familiar motions that brought comfort even in the hardest times. By 6 a.m., she had prepared what little inventory she could afford: a dozen cinnamon rolls, 8 croissants, 6 blueberry muffins, and 1 special chocolate croissant that she'd made using the last of her premium chocolate. It was beautiful, perfect, with delicate layers and a glossy finish. In better times, she would have charged $8 for it. Now, she priced it at $6, hoping someone would see the value. The morning cold seeped through the bakery's old windows as Sarah unlocked the front door and flipped the sign to "Open." Outside, the December sky was still dark. and the street was empty except for a few early commuters hurrying past, their breath visible in the freezing air. This was always the hardest part, the waiting, hoping that today would be different, praying that enough customers would come through that door to make the difference between survival and surrender. Marcus Wellington had not intended to stop at the bakery. In fact, he hadn't intended to be on this street at all. His driver had taken a detour to avoid traffic on the main boulevard, cutting through what Marcus thought of as the old neighborhood, the part of the city where buildings still had character instead of glass and steel, where people knew their neighbors' names. At 47, Marcus had built an empire. Wellington Industries had started as a small tech firm in his garage and had grown into a multinational corporation worth $3 billion. He'd been featured in Forbes, interviewed on financial news networks, invited to speak at Harvard Business School. He had a penthouse overlooking the river, a collection of vintage cars, and a calendar so full that his assistant scheduled his meals. He also had an ulcer, high blood pressure, and a daughter who called him by his first name because, as she'd said during their last argument, "You've never been around enough to earn the title Dad." This morning was critical. The merger with Stratton Technologies would be the crowning achievement of his career, a deal that would cement his legacy. The meeting was at 8 a.m. sharp, and Marcus needed every minute to prepare. But then his driver had pointed out that they were running early and Marcus had made a split-second decision. "Pull over here," he'd said, spotting the small bakery with its warm, glowing windows. "I need coffee." The truth was, he didn't need coffee. He needed a moment to breathe, to quiet the anxiety that had been building in his chest for weeks. Just 5 minutes to not be Marcus Wellington's CEO, to be just a man buying coffee in a small bakery. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and warmth enveloped him immediately. The scent of fresh bread and cinnamon filled the air, and for a moment, Marcus was transported back to his childhood, to his grandmother's kitchen on Sunday mornings. "Good morning. Welcome to Mitchell's Morning Light." The woman behind the counter smiled at him, and Marcus noticed immediately that it was the kind of smile that took effort. Her eyes were kind but tired, shadowed with the weight of worries she was trying to hide. "Coffee, please," Marcus said, approaching the counter. "Black, large." "Coming right up," Sarah said, turning to the coffee maker. "Would you like anything to eat? The cinnamon rolls just came out of the oven." Marcus glanced at the display case. The selection was small, but everything looked homemade, crafted with care. His nutritionist would disapprove, who's supposed to be doing intermittent fasting. But something about the warmth of this place made him reconsider. "I'll take a cinnamon roll," he heard himself say. As Sarah prepared his order, the bell chimed again. Marcus turned to see a young boy enter, no more than 7 or 8 years old. The child's coat was too thin for the December cold, and his sneakers had seen better days. But what struck Marcus most was the expression on the boy's face, a mixture of hope and hesitation, the look of someone about to ask for something he wasn't sure he'd receive. The boy approached the counter, standing on his toes to see over it. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said quietly. "Do you have any day-old bread? My mom said sometimes bakeries sell it cheaper, and we need some for sandwiches." Sarah's expression shifted, softening even further. She glanced at her meager display, then back at the boy. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Daniel," the boy said. "I'm Daniel." "Well, Daniel, I don't have any day-old bread today, but I have something better." She reached into the case and pulled out one of the blueberry muffins. "How about this? Fresh this morning." Daniel's eyes widened. "How much is it?" Sarah appeared to think for a moment. "For you, $1. Marcus knew immediately that the muffin was worth more than that, probably 3 or 4 times more. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill and a handful of coins. He counted carefully. $1.35. "I have enough," he said, his face breaking into a smile that transformed it completely. Sarah took the dollar and handed him the muffin, waving away the coins. "You keep the change, honey. You might need it for something else." "Thank you." Daniel clutched the muffin like it was treasure and rushed out of the bakery, the bell chiming behind him. Marcus watched the exchange with an uncomfortable feeling in his chest. When was the last time he'd done something kind without calculating the return on investment? Sarah turned back to him, placing his coffee and cinnamon roll on the counter. "I'm sorry about the wait. That'll be $7. Marcus handed her a 20. "Keep the change." "Oh, I couldn't." "Please," Marcus said. What you just did for that boy, that was generous." Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "That wasn't generosity, Mr. Wellington, Marcus Wellington. That wasn't generosity, Mr. Wellington. That was just being human." She paused, then added quietly, "Sometimes being human is all we have left." The morning had been slow. By 10:30, Sarah had sold 4 cinnamon rolls, 3 croissants, and 2 muffins. $28. Add that to what was in the register, and she had $71.17. The rent was $1,200. She tried not to think about it as she wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, rearranged the remaining items in the display case, checked the clock. Tommy would be at school now, sitting in his classroom, hopefully focused on his lessons and not worrying about his mother. The chocolate croissant remained in the case, perfect and untouched. Sarah had placed it in the center, hoping its beauty would catch someone's eye. $6. If she could sell that and the remaining items, maybe she'd have enough to buy ingredients for tomorrow, to keep the doors open one more day. One more day. That's all she ever asked for anymore. Just one more day. The bell chimed. Sarah looked up to see an elderly woman enter, moving slowly with the help of a wooden cane. She wore a threadbare coat and a scarf that had been mended multiple times. Her face was lined with years of hard living, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Good morning," Sarah said warmly. "How can I help you today?" The woman approached the counter, eyeing the display case with interest. "My granddaughter just had a baby," she said, her voice carrying the weight of age but also pride. "A beautiful little girl. I wanted to bring her something special, something sweet to celebrate." Sarah's heart lifted. "Congratulations. That's wonderful news." The elderly woman smiled, but Sarah noticed her hands trembling slightly as she opened her small purse. "How much is that beautiful one there?" "The chocolate one? The chocolate croissant? That's $6. The woman's face fell almost imperceptibly, but Sarah saw it. She watched as the woman counted the contents of her purse, $3 and some change. I thought I had more," the woman said quietly, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I'm sorry to have wasted your time." She began to turn away, and Sarah felt something break open inside her chest. She thought of Tommy, of the boy earlier that morning, of all the people struggling just to find moments of joy in a world that seemed determined to take them away. "Wait," Sarah said. The woman stopped. Sarah reached into the display case and pulled out the chocolate croissant. She placed it carefully in a box, folding the corners with practiced precision, and tied it with a ribbon she'd been saving for special occasions. "This is for your granddaughter and her new baby," Sarah said, holding out the box. "With my congratulations." The woman stared at her, confusion and suspicion crossing her face. "I told you I only have $3. "I know," Sarah said gently. "And this is my gift. Please, let me do this." "But please," Sarah repeated. "It would make me happy. You're celebrating new life, and that's the most beautiful thing in the world. Let me be part of that celebration." For a moment, the woman just stood there, eyes glistening with tears. Then she reached out and took the box with trembling hands. "God bless you," she whispered. "God bless you, child." After the woman left, Sarah stood alone in the quiet bakery, staring at the empty space in the display case where the chocolate croissant had been. That was it, her last premium item. The one thing she'd hoped would make a difference. She'd just given it away. Sarah felt the tears come then, hot and fast. She pressed her hands against the counter, shoulders shaking, allowing herself this moment of despair. What had she done? How would she pay the rent now? How would she feed Tommy? The bell chimed. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself, and looked up. Marcus Wellington stood in the doorway. Marcus had left the bakery that morning intending never to return. He'd gone to his meeting, presented his strategy, negotiated the terms of the merger. Everything had gone perfectly. By noon, he'd shaken hands with the Stratton executives, and his lawyers were drawing up the papers. He should have been elated. Instead, he felt empty. During the meeting, he kept thinking about Sarah Mitchell and her small bakery, about the way she'd given that muffin to the boy, about what she'd said. Sometimes being human is all we have left. When the meeting ended, Marcus found himself telling his driver to take him back to that street, back to Mitchell's Morning Light. He told himself he just wanted another coffee, but he knew that wasn't true. He wanted to understand something that had been bothering him all morning. Why did a woman who clearly had very little give away what she had? What did she know that he didn't? Now, standing in the doorway, he saw her tears and hesitated. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe he should leave. But Sarah had already seen him. "Mr. Wellington," she said, quickly wiping her face. "I didn't expect to see you again. Would you like more coffee?" Marcus closed the door behind him and approached the counter. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Sarah said automatically, then seemed to reconsider. "Actually, no. I'm not fine. But I will be. I have to be." Marcus set his briefcase down. "What happened?" Sarah laughed, but it was a sad sound. "Nothing happened. That's the problem. Nothing is happening. The customers aren't coming. The bills keep piling up, and She gestured helplessly at the empty display case. "I just gave away my last premium item to an elderly woman who couldn't afford it. The chocolate croissant. You noticed it? It was beautiful," Marcus said. "Why did you give it away?" Sarah met his eyes, and Marcus saw something in them that he recognized from his own mirror: exhaustion, fear, but also defiance. The refusal to give up even when giving up would be easier. "Because she needed something beautiful," Sarah said simply. "Because her granddaughter just had a baby and she wanted to celebrate, and $3 was all she had. Because I remember what it feels like to count pennies and still come up short. Because," she paused, voice cracking, "because my husband always said that the measure of our character isn't what we do when we have plenty. It's what we do when we have nothing left to give." Marcus felt something shift inside him, like tectonic plates moving deep underground. "Your husband sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Sarah said softly. "He died 4 years ago. Cancer. We had insurance, but it wasn't enough. The medical bills, the funeral, trying to keep this place open. I've been drowning ever since, trying to keep my head above water for my son." "You have a son?" Sarah's expression transformed, grief giving way to love. "Tommy. He's 7. Smartest, kindest little boy you'd ever meet. He's at school right now, probably worrying about me instead of focusing on his math problems." She smiled despite herself. "He wants to be a baker like his dad when he grows up." Marcus thought of his own daughter, Veronica, 23 years old, working at a nonprofit in Seattle, as far from his business empire as she could get. They spoke once a month if he was lucky, and those conversations were stilted, formal, more like business calls than father and daughter. "I have a daughter," Marcus heard himself say. "We don't speak much. I've been too busy building an empire to build a relationship with her." Sarah looked at him with surprising compassion. "It's never too late to change that, isn't it?" Marcus asked. "I've missed so much. Her graduation, her first apartment, the little moments that matter. I sent money instead of showing up. I thought providing was the same as being present." "You're here now," Sarah said. "You're realizing it now. That's the first step." They stood in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by their regrets and their recognition of what really mattered. "How much do you need?" Marcus asked suddenly. Sarah blinked. "Excuse me?" "To keep this place open. To keep going. How much?" Sarah's face flushed. "Mr. Wellington, I'm not asking for. I know you're not. I'm offering." "How much?" Sarah shook her head firmly. "I can't accept charity. That's not who I am." "Then don't think of it as charity," Marcus said. He was surprised by the urgency in his own voice. "Think of it as an investment, in kindness, in humanity, in the things that actually matter." "I don't understand." Marcus leaned against the counter, suddenly feeling very tired. "This morning, I closed a merger worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I shook hands with executives, signed papers, did everything I've spent my whole life working toward. And you know what I felt? Nothing. Absolutely nothing." He looked around the small bakery. "But watching you give that muffin to that boy, watching you give your last pastry to that elderly woman, that made me feel something. That reminded me of why any of this is supposed to matter." Sarah didn't accept Marcus's money that day. Despite his insistence, despite his arguments, she held firm to her principles. She wouldn't take a handout, but she did accept his help. Marcus made some calls. Within a week, the bakery's rent was restructured into a manageable payment plan through a community development program Marcus connected her with. He introduced Sarah to a local business consultant who helped her streamline operations, reduce waste, and identify her most profitable items. More importantly, Marcus became a customer. He came every morning for coffee and a cinnamon roll. And when people saw the Marcus Wellington sitting in Mitchell's morning light, reading the paper and chatting with Sarah like old friends, they became curious. A small article appeared in the local newspaper, Billionaire CEO's favorite bakery. Then a food blogger visited and wrote a glowing review. Then the morning news did a segment on neighborhood gems. Within 3 months, Sarah had to hire 2 employees. Within 6 months, she'd paid off her back rent and started saving again. Tommy helped out after school, learning to make the cinnamon rolls his father had perfected, wearing a miniature apron Sarah had made for him. But the real change wasn't in the business. It was in the people. Sarah started a program. Every morning, the last pastry of each variety was set aside for anyone who needed it but couldn't afford it. No questions asked, no judgment, just kindness. The program spread. Other businesses in the neighborhood started similar initiatives. The coffee shop offered free drinks to anyone having a hard day. The bookstore created a lending library. The pharmacy helped seniors navigate their prescriptions. The neighborhood transformed from a collection of struggling businesses into a community bound by compassion. And Marcus transformed too. He started working fewer hours, delegating more, trusting his team. He flew to Seattle to see Veronica, and when she opened the door, suspicious and guarded, he didn't launch into excuses or explanations. He simply said, "I'm sorry. I've been a terrible father. I want to do better. Will you help me learn how?" It took time. Forgiveness always does. But slowly, carefully, Marcus rebuilt his relationship with his daughter. He learned about her work, met her friends, showed up for the small moments he'd always missed. One Saturday morning, 6 months after he'd first walked into Mitchell's morning light, Marcus arrived at the bakery to find it full of people. A grand reopening banner hung over the counter, and Sarah stood behind it with Tommy, both wearing matching aprons, both grinning. "What's all this?" Marcus asked. "We're officially debt-free," Sarah said, eyes shining. "The bakery is stable, we're in the black, and we're celebrating. This is all because of you." "No," Marcus said firmly. "This is because of you. Your kindness, your refusal to give up, your willingness to give even when you had nothing. I just helped clear the path. You did the walking." Tommy tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Mr. Marcus, Mom says you're like family now. Is that okay?" Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's more than okay, Tommy. That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me." As the celebration continued around them, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "That day, when I gave away the chocolate croissant, I was terrified. I thought I'd made the worst decision possible. I thought I'd lost everything. But you didn't." "No, I didn't. Because you came back. Because that one act of kindness, that one choice to give instead of protect what little I had, it changed everything. It brought you into our lives. It started a chain reaction I never could have predicted." Marcus shook his head in wonder. "Do you know what's funny? I came here that first morning because I was running early for a meeting, a merger that was supposed to define my career. I closed that deal, but I can't even remember the details now. But I remember watching you give that boy a muffin. I remember your face when you gave away that croissant. Those memories are clearer than anything I've accomplished in business." "That's because they're real," Sarah said simply. "Money and deals and mergers, those are just numbers on paper. But kindness, connection, love, those are real. Those last." 2 years later, on a cold December morning, Sarah stood in her bakery, now renamed Mitchell's Morning Light, a community bakery, and marveled at how much had changed. The space had been renovated but kept its character. The old ovens had been replaced with newer models, but Sarah had insisted on keeping the original brick oven David had installed. The walls were freshly painted, the display cases gleamed, and the selection of pastries had expanded to include David's original recipes alongside new creations Sarah and Tommy developed together. But the most important addition was the corner dedicated to the community care program. Every day, a portion of the bakery's proceeds went to providing free baked goods to anyone in need. The wall behind the counter displayed photos of community members who'd been helped. Daniel, the boy who'd asked for day-old bread, now thriving in school with a scholarship Sarah had helped him apply for. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who'd wanted to celebrate her granddaughter's baby, now a regular volunteer who taught Tommy Chinese cooking techniques. The program had grown beyond the bakery. Marcus had established a foundation, funded by his personal wealth, that supported similar community initiatives across the city. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations at Wellington Industries, appointing a new CEO while he focused on philanthropy and rebuilding his family relationships. This morning, Christmas Eve, the bakery was hosting a special celebration. Sarah had closed early to regular customers and opened the doors to everyone who'd been part of their journey. Tommy, now 9 years old and nearly as tall as his mother's shoulder, worked alongside her, preparing hot chocolate and arranging plates of cookies. Marcus arrived with Veronica, who'd moved back to the city and now worked with her father at the foundation. The elderly Mrs. Chen came with her granddaughter and great-granddaughter, the baby they'd celebrated 2 years ago. Now a toddler taking her first steps, Daniel arrived with his mother, a single parent who'd found stable employment with help from the foundation's job placement program. Business owners from the neighborhood filled the space, sharing stories of how the community care model had transformed their own practices. As Sarah looked around the crowded bakery, listening to laughter and conversation, watching Tommy help serve cookies to Mrs. Chen's great-granddaughter, she felt David's presence so strongly it took her breath away. "You did it," she whispered to the memory of her husband. "We did it." Marcus appeared at her elbow, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He handed her one. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "I was just thinking about that morning, when I gave away the chocolate croissant. I was so scared I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. And now? Now I understand what David was trying to teach me all along. It's not about what we keep, it's about what we give. Not because we'll get something back, but because giving is what makes us human. It's what connects us." Marcus nodded slowly. "I spent 40 years believing that success meant accumulation. More money, more power, more recognition. But I was accumulating things while losing everything that mattered." He paused, looking around the crowded bakery. "You taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in relationships, in community, in the lives we touch." Tommy ran up to them, face flushed with excitement. "Mom, Mr. Marcus, Mrs. Chen wants to teach me how to make dumplings next week. Can I, please?" Sarah laughed and ruffled his hair. "Of course, sweetheart. That sounds wonderful." As Tommy raced back to Mrs. Chen, Veronica joined them, slipping her arm through her father's. "This is beautiful, Dad," she said quietly. "I'm proud of you." Marcus's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart, and I'm grateful for second chances, for people like Sarah who remind us what really matters." "Speech! Speech!" someone called out, and soon the entire room was chanting. Sarah tried to wave them off, but Marcus gently nudged her forward. "They want to hear from you," he said. "Tell them what you told me, about kindness." Sarah stepped to the center of the room, suddenly shy despite knowing everyone present. But then she saw Tommy's encouraging smile, and the words came. "2 years ago, I stood in this bakery on the edge of losing everything. I was down to my last premium pastry, praying for a miracle, when an elderly woman walked in wanting to celebrate her great-granddaughter's birth. She didn't have enough money, but I gave her that pastry anyway, and I was terrified. I thought I'd just sealed my fate." She paused, looking around at the faces, watching her faces that had become family. "But what I learned that day is that kindness is never wasted. Every act of compassion, every moment of generosity, every time we choose to give instead of protect what we have, those choices ripple outward in ways we can't predict or control. That one chocolate croissant led to this." She gestured around the room, "To all of you, to this community, to hope. My husband David used to say that we're not defined by what we have, but by what we're willing to give when we have nothing left." And I've learned that's true. The moments when we're most vulnerable, most scared, most uncertain, those are the moments when our choices reveal who we really are. She found Marcus's eyes across the room. "A very wise businessman once asked me why I gave away something valuable when I could barely afford to keep my doors open. And the truth is, I gave it away because I needed to remember that I'm human. That before I'm a business owner, or a baker, or even a mother, I'm a person connected to other people, and those connections That's what saves us. The room was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. As the celebration continued, Sarah found herself standing by the window, watching snow begin to fall on the street outside. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the grief and struggle and fear that had almost consumed her. She thought about the choice to give when she had nothing, and she understood, finally, what David had been trying to teach her all along, that love multiplies when we give it away, that kindness compounds like interest, and that the only wealth that truly matters is the wealth we share. In the reflection of the window, she saw Tommy helping serve cookies, saw Marcus laughing with his daughter, saw Mrs. Chen holding her great-granddaughter, saw Daniel studying homework at a corner table, saw all these lives intertwined because of one act of compassion on one cold morning. And Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was the richest woman in the world. This story teaches us that true wealth isn't found in what we accumulate, but in what we're willing to give, especially when we have the least to spare. Sarah's choice to give away her last pastry, made in a moment of faith rather than fear, created a ripple effect that transformed not just her life, but an entire community. The lesson here is profound. Kindness is never wasted. When we choose compassion over self-protection, when we give instead of hoard, when we connect instead of isolate, we create possibilities we could never imagine. Marcus learned that success without humanity is empty. Sarah learned that generosity in scarcity is powerful. Together they discovered that our greatest impact comes not from our achievements, but from our willingness to lift others. Remember this: the most valuable thing you can give isn't money or possessions. It's your humanity. Every small act of kindness matters. Every moment of compassion counts. Every choice to give instead of protect creates ripples that extend far beyond what you can see. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us what really matters in life. Leave a comment below and tell us about a time when someone's kindness changed your life, or when your own act of compassion created unexpected blessings. Together we can create a world where kindness is our currency and compassion is our legacy. Thank you for watching, and may you always remember, you are richest when you give.